In the streets of South Korea, the story kicks off with a low-key sense of unease, following Norman, an ex-convict with a vibe that just didn't sit right. On that particular day, Norman's focus was locked on Lily, a junior high schooler casually heading to church for worship. Oblivious to the guy shadowing her, Lily breezed through the church doors, taking her usual spot in the congregation. Norman, not missing a beat, slipped inside after her, picking an empty seat where he could keep a steady eye on her. The service carried on as expected, but Norman's lingering presence didn't go unnoticed. As the gathering wrapped up, the church's administrator, a priest named John, stepped in for a quick chat, giving Lily the chance to slip away. Still oblivious that she had been stalked, John extended an invitation for Norman to swing by his office. In the cozy confines of his office, John got right to it, explaining that he wanted Norman to join the congregation. While Norman looked like someone with a few stories to tell, most of them probably not great, John didn't let that faze him. He handed Norman a form to fill out, snapping a quick picture of him to complete the records. Just as the photo was taken, John's phone buzzed with a call. Apologizing for the interruption, he stepped out to take it, leaving Norman to finish up. But the call wasn't just a usual church chit-chat, it was messy. On the other end was a detective John had hired to check up on his wife, Emma. Turns out, John's gut feeling was spot on. The detective confirmed what he hoped wasn't true. Emma was cheating. And the cherry on top? The guy she was sneaking around with was another priest, someone John knew all too well. When John returned, Norman was already on his feet, ready to head out. He mentioned having other stuff to do, and John, ever the polite one, offered to help him with his shoes. That's when John spotted the ankle monitor peeking out from under Norman's pants. The realization hit quick. Norman wasn't just some random guy. He was under house arrest, stuck in the system's watchful eye. Later that evening, John and Emma drove home together. The tension in the car so thick, you could cut it with a knife. John kept quiet about what he'd learned. He wasn't ready to open that can of worms just yet. Along the way, they stopped at the construction site of a flashy new church. Emma, ever hopeful, mentioned how amazing it would be if John could lead the congregation there. He nodded along, letting her dream, even as his own thoughts ran wild. After dropping Emma off at home, John headed to the central church to meet with the head of the priest association. He hoped to secure the leadership position at the new church, but those hopes came crashing down when he learned that Chris, the head priest's own biological son, had already been chosen, and if that wasn't bad enough, Chris was also the guy Emma had been seeing on the side. As John left the building, his bad day got even worse. Right there, standing in his path, was Chris, cool as ever. Chris greeted John with a smile, his attitude so casual it was almost insulting. John, channeling every ounce of self-control, kept his composure, offering a polite nod before Chris walked away. That night, John knelt at the altar in his church, his prayers overflowing with raw emotion. He poured his heart out to God, asking for direction amidst the chaos of his life. Tears streamed freely as he laid everything bare, his desire to lead the new church, his wife's betrayal, and the uncertainty weighing him down. Then came another call, this time from Emma. Her voice was shaky, the panic palpable as she explained that their son hadn't come home. With kidnappings all over the news lately, her fears hit hard. John promised to search for their son, but as the call ended, his eyes landed on Norman's photograph, still sitting on the printer. The image, blurred and streaked by raindrops, had taken on an eerie, almost demonic appearance. A chill ran down John's spine. Something didn't feel right, and his suspicion of Norman grew stronger by the second. Determined to act, John drove to Norman's listed address and parked at a safe distance. From his vantage point, he watched Norman load a shovel and other suspicious tools into his van. The sight sent John's mind racing, his gut screaming that something was off. He called the cops, hoping they'd jump into action, but they only asked for more details. Feeling like he was getting the runaround, John knew he had to take things into his own hands. Norman noticed John's car. John quickly ducked down, holding his breath as he tried to stay out of sight. Once Norman drove off, John followed, trailing him deep into the woods as rain poured down in heavy sheets. The forest path was narrow and dark, adding to the already intense atmosphere. Suddenly, Norman's car pulled up behind him, forcing John to stop. Norman approached John's window, tapping on the glass with an unsettling calmness. John froze, refusing to roll it down or engage. When Norman eventually walked back to his car, John seized the moment, stepping out to check Norman's van. But the search revealed nothing, not a single clue about his son's whereabouts. Then John noticed something chilling. Norman's ankle monitor was gone, discarded like it had never been there in the first place. Thinking he had made a mistake, John quickly hurried back to his car, intending to leave Norman behind and move on. But before he could drive off, Norman caught up to him, his approach tense and confrontational. A struggle broke out, with Norman throwing the first move. John, though determined, was outmatched, his attempts to defend himself falling short against Norman's strength. Just as Norman was about to make his next move, fumbling to remove his coat in the pouring rain, he lost his balance, slipping and falling backward. His head hit a jagged rock with a sickening thud, and the impact claimed his life instantly. John froze, panic spreading through his body as he stared at the lifeless form of Norman. The realization of what had just happened began to sink in, when his phone suddenly rang. It was Emma, calling to tell him their son had returned home safely. Her tone carried relief, as she explained that their son had been invited to his friend's house after school when no one came to pick him up. The news, while comforting, shook John to his core. He had accused Norman of kidnapping and had taken part in a confrontation that ended in his death, all for nothing. Norman had been innocent, and now his death was in vain. As John sat in the driver's seat, trying to process the chaos swirling in his mind, a flash of lightning illuminated the cliffside ahead. For a moment, he thought he could see the face of Jesus, carved in the rock by the interplay of shadows and light. The sight filled him with both terror and wonder, leading him to believe it was a divine revelation. Convinced that God had sent him to punish Norman, John decided to dispose of the body, hauling it to the edge of the cliff and letting it plunge into the abyss below. The next morning at the police station, a detective named Kate stepped into the spotlight. Her hardened demeanor carried years of grief. Norman had once kidnapped her younger sister, though she had been rescued in the end. But the scars of the ordeal never healed. Kate's sister, deeply traumatized by the experience, later fell into depression and ended her own life, leaving Kate haunted by guilt. Night after night, the memory of her sister's suffering tormented her, leaving her determined to bring Norman to justice. As reports of Norman's suspected involvement in a new kidnapping case surfaced, the police chief called a meeting. A young girl named Lily had gone missing, and Norman, given his history, was the prime suspect. The chief recounted Norman's past, painting a picture of a man who had endured a violent childhood, the echoes of which had shaped him into what he had become. With the gravity of the situation hanging over them, the team set out to investigate, Kate leading the charge. Kate and her colleagues went to Norman's residence, only to find it empty. From there, Kate retraced Norman's steps, following leads that eventually led her to the church he had visited the previous day. Meeting with John, Kate asked him for information about his encounter with Norman. John, though visibly nervous, kept his composure, calmly sharing the details of their interaction but carefully omitting what had happened in the forest. As Kate and her team searched the premises, they found a pair of shoes caked in dirt, a detail that raised suspicions. Kate, perceptive and sharp, felt that John was hiding something, though she had no evidence to act on it. John, for his part, struggled to mask his guilt, his demeanor growing more tense as Kate looked around his office. After the detectives left, John, consumed by guilt over both the accidental killing of Norman and his lies to the police, decided to confide in the head priest. His plan was to confess everything and then turn himself in. But before he could speak, the head priest began confiding in John, sharing his own burden. The head priest revealed that he had learned of Chris's affair with someone's wife, though he remained unaware that Emma was the woman in question. Unable to appoint Chris as the leader of the new church, the head priest announced his decision to choose John instead. As the head priest made his announcement, John's gaze drifted to the wall. There, among the decorations, he saw a pattern that resembled the face of Jesus, and he took it as another divine sign. The revelation shifted his perspective. He decided that his actions had been justified and chose to keep the truth about Norman's fate a secret. Later that day, John picked Emma up for an event. As they drove, he surprised her by asking her to confess her sins, specifically her affair with Chris. Emma, caught off guard, initially denied everything, fearing John's reaction. But eventually, with nowhere left to hide, she broke down and admitted to the affair, asking both John and God for forgiveness. The tension between them began to ease as the truth finally came out. Their destination was a nursing home near the forest, where they were set to attend a religious event. Upon arrival, a staff member mentioned that she was waiting for an ambulance she had called to assist a heavily injured man who had arrived the other night seeking help. She explained that the man was currently resting in one of the rooms. John's heart raced. He feared the man she spoke of could be Norman. When John entered the room, the shocking truth hit him like a ton of bricks. Sleeping there, alive and breathing, was Norman. Somehow, against all odds, he had survived. The sight left John momentarily frozen, his mind racing to make sense of it all. As if searching for divine guidance, he glanced up at the sky, where a flash of light illuminated what he believed to be an angel. To John, this was no coincidence. It had to be another sign from God. Convinced that he was being guided, he came to the conclusion that Norman's recovery wasn't meant to lead him to better treatment. It was meant to lead him to punishment. Determined to act on what he believed was divine will, John whisked Norman away from the orphanage, taking him to an abandoned building nestled in the desolate outskirts of town. There, in the cold emptiness of the space, John tied Norman to a chair using duct tape, ensuring there was no chance for escape. Norman, gradually regaining consciousness, groggily spoke up, his voice filled with confusion and anger. He demanded answers, asking John why he had done this to him. But John, lost in his belief, could only respond with uncertainty. He admitted that he himself didn't fully understand what was happening, but emphasized that God's signs had repeatedly pointed him toward Norman. He began to theorize aloud, piecing together the idea that God wanted Norman to be punished for his past sins. Sacrifice, John believed, was the only way for Norman to earn forgiveness. Norman, unable to contain his frustration, cut through John's ramblings with a startling revelation. He told John about Lily, the girl the police and Kate were desperately trying to locate. She was still alive, Norman claimed, but if John killed him, her location would be lost forever. Her death would become inevitable, as Norman was the only person who knew where she was being held. The words stopped John in his tracks, his grip on the situation wavering. Reluctantly, John decided to postpone the execution, intent on first confirming whether Lily was truly alive. Later, as John was descending the stairs inside the building, he slipped, catching himself just before falling. In that moment, his eyes landed on a random number scrawled on the wall, a peculiar sight that stuck with him. Feeling it was another divine sign, John abandoned the building and returned to his church to lead the evening service. Drawing inspiration from the number, he used it to find a chapter and verse in the Bible to read during the service, convinced that it held greater meaning. Meanwhile, Kate, ever determined to uncover the truth, secretly inspected John's car to confirm her suspicions. Her sharp instincts paid off. She found traces of soil stuck to the tires. This particular type of soil was unique to a specific plot of land on the city's outskirts, further narrowing her search. Armed with this information, Kate made her way to the abandoned building. Upon arrival, she noticed fresh tire marks in the dirt, solidifying her belief that John had been there recently. As she explored the space, she stumbled upon Norman, still tied to the chair. Drawing her gun, Kate demanded answers, forcing Norman to reveal where Lily was being kept. But before Norman could respond, John appeared from behind and struck Kate with a shovel, knocking her unconscious. When Kate eventually regained consciousness, she found herself bound to a chair, now seated alongside Norman. John stood before them, his belief in divine guidance unwavering. He revealed his plan. It was time for Norman's sacrifice. To cover his tracks, he intended to stage Kate's involvement, making it appear as though she had shot Norman before falling from the building during a struggle. Kate, panicked and desperate, begged John to reconsider, arguing that Norman's death would ensure Lily was never found. But John, convinced that Lily was already dead, refused to listen. In his mind, Norman's death was necessary, not for saving lives, but for fulfilling God's will. Norman, aware of the stakes, chose to provoke John, pushing him further into his misguided resolve. Kate took advantage of the distraction, using it to headbutt John and break free from her restraints. A tense struggle ensued, during which Kate managed to handcuff John. But as the chaos reached its peak, Norman was dragged by a ladder and nearly fell from the building. In a desperate bid to save him, Kate grabbed the tape tied around Norman's legs, holding on with all her strength. At that critical moment, Norman gave her a cryptic clue about Lily's location. He muttered something about a one-eyed monster. But before he could elaborate further, Kate's grip faltered. Unable to hold on any longer, Norman fell to his demise, his secrets lost with him. Soon after, the police arrived, arresting John and retrieving Norman's body. As John was led to the patrol car, his demeanor remained calm, even serene. With a faint smile, he carried himself as if he had done the right thing, convinced that his actions had been justified in the eyes of God. At the police station, John sat comfortably, sipping tea in the interrogation room. His demeanor was unnervingly calm, as if he truly believed he'd acted according to God's will. There wasn't the slightest trace of guilt in his expression. To him, everything he had done, every choice, every action, had been righteous. Lily, he believed, was dead, and her death was part of the divine plan. Kate, however, couldn't shake the unsettling contradictions in John's story. Frustrated and curious, she decided to consult a psychiatrist who had previously examined both John and Norman. When she sat down with the doctor, the conversation quickly revealed alarming truths about John's mental state. The psychiatrist explained that John suffered from a psychological phenomenon called pareidolia, a condition where one perceives patterns, objects, or meanings that don't actually exist. Paired with this was apophenia, a mental illness characterized by the tendency to see connections or relationships between unrelated events. The doctor laid it out plainly. What John had believed were divine signs and revelations from God were nothing more than visual illusions conjured by his own mind. His faith, while genuine, had been warped by his mental condition, causing him to misinterpret random occurrences as cosmic messages. It was a chilling explanation, one that made Kate even more determined to unravel the truth. Switching gears, Kate asked about Norman. She wanted to understand his motive and the life that had driven him down such a dark path. The psychiatrist's tone shifted as he described Norman's tragic history. As a child, Norman had suffered severe abuse at the hands of his mother and stepfather. Nearly every day, he had been locked in the attic of their old house, a suffocating space with a single window. The trauma had carved deep scars into Norman's psyche, shaping him into the man he had become. Hearing this, Kate couldn't help but recall Norman's cryptic words before his death. He had mentioned a one-eyed monster, and suddenly, the meaning became clear. She flipped through Norman's notes and found a drawing of an attic with a single window staring out like a watchful eye. The one-eyed monster was the very place where his nightmares had begun. Realizing the significance of this clue, Kate immediately began searching for a house that matched the description. Given its old and uncommon architectural style, it didn't take long to locate the property. Enlisting the help of her fellow detectives, Kate made her way to the site. Meanwhile, far away, the truth about Lily's fate was revealed. She was alive, tied up in the attic of an abandoned house that was set to be demolished. Time was critical. Kate raced to the house, her heart pounding as she fought against the clock. When she arrived, she found Lily just in time, freeing her moments before the building could claim her life. The relief was palpable. Lily was safe. Days later, after ensuring Lily was recovering, Kate visited John in prison. Sitting across from him, she observed the same unsettling calm in his demeanor. John, ever steadfast in his beliefs, asked her whether Lily's body had been found. There was no hesitation in his question. He was utterly convinced of her death, as if it were a truth written in stone. Kate, however, had different news. She revealed that Lily was not only alive but had been saved. John's reaction was immediate and incredulous. He refused to believe her, dismissing the revelation outright. For him, God's signs were irrefutable. The idea that Lily had survived contradicted everything he thought he understood about the divine will. Kate's words were futile against John's unwavering faith. As the psychiatrist had explained, John's perception of reality had been deeply affected by his mental illness. To him, everything he had seen, the lightning-lit cliff, the decorations resembling Jesus, the cloud, was proof of a higher calling. And despite the truth laid bare before him, John remained steadfast, trapped in a mind warped by illusion.